The California sun beat down mercilessly on the Naval Special Warfare Training Command as Petty Officer Second Class Maya Chen stood in formation, her compact 5'3" frame rigid despite bone-deep exhaustion. Sweat trickled down her spine, but she didn't move, didn't blink, didn't acknowledge the whispers rippling through the ranks of trainees around her. There she is, 47 failures. How is she still here? Dead weight, she's gonna get someone killed. Maya had heard it all before. For 47 consecutive days, she had failed every single combat drill thrown at her. 47 days of instructors shaking their heads, of clipboard notations, of disappointed silence that cut deeper than any shouted criticism. She had become a ghost at the compound, someone people looked through rather than at, as if acknowledging her presence might contaminate their own chances of success. The morning briefing ended, and the trainees dispersed toward their assigned training stations. Maya moved with them, isolating herself at the edge of the group. She checked her M4 carbine with practiced efficiency. Weapons handling was one thing she could do perfectly. It was everything that came after that fell apart. "Chen, you're up first. Kill house, standard CQB protocol," Lieutenant Morrison barked, not even looking at her. His tone carried the weight of inevitability, like announcing the weather. Maya's stomach clenched, but she nodded and moved toward the kill house, a plywood and concrete structure designed to simulate close-quarters combat in urban environments. She'd entered this building 16 times. She'd failed it 16 times. Today would be attempt 17. From the observation tower, Commander Jack Reeves watched through binoculars, his weathered face unreadable behind dark aviator sunglasses. At 52, Reeves was a legend in the SEAL community. 3 decades of service, 5 combat deployments, more decorations than he bothered to wear. He'd been running this training command for 8 years and had seen thousands of candidates come through. Most quit. Some got injured. A handful simply couldn't handle the mental pressure. Maya Chen was different, and that bothered him. "Sir, with respect, why are we still wasting resources on her?" Lieutenant Morrison climbed the tower stairs, tablet in hand. Psych eval came back. Severe performance anxiety under simulated combat stress. Recommend immediate removal from the training pipeline. She's taking up a slot that could go to someone who actually has a chance. Reeves didn't lower his binoculars. Below, Maya was entering the kill house, her rifle raised in proper stance. What were her scores in tactical planning? Morrison glanced at his tablet. Top of her class. 98th percentile in strategic analysis, situational awareness, and threat assessment. But sir, that doesn't matter if she can't. What about her physical fitness scores? Above average for her size, but her marksmanship on the static range. Morrison hesitated. Expert marksman, consistent groupings, multiple weapon platforms. But Commander, when we add stress, when we add simulated enemy contact, she completely falls apart. You've seen it yourself. Reeves had seen it. He'd watched Maya clear static shooting drills with precision that would make a sniper envious. He'd watched her disassemble and reassemble weapons blindfolded faster than men twice her size. He'd watched her solve tactical problems that stumped trainees with years more experience. And he'd watched her freeze, utterly and completely, the moment simulated combat began. Below, the kill house drill had started. Maya entered the first room, her movements textbook perfect. She scanned corners, checked her 6, maintained proper spacing from walls. The first pop-up target appeared, a hostile with a weapon. Maya engaged it cleanly. 2 rounds, center mass. The target dropped. So far, so good. She moved to the second room. This was where it always fell apart. The room was designed with multiple pop-up targets that appeared simultaneously, accompanied by a recording of intense machine gun fire played through speakers at deafening volume. It simulated the chaos of real combat, multiple threats, sensory overload, split-second decisions. The targets popped up. The machine gun recording thundered through the space. Maya froze. It wasn't a subtle hesitation. It was a complete physical shutdown. Her rifle remained raised, her eyes were open, but she simply stopped moving. For 5 eternal seconds, she stood paralyzed while hostile targets remained unengaged and a simulated hostage scenario played out wrong in front of her. When the buzzer sounded, ending the drill, Maya slowly lowered her weapon. Her hands were shaking visibly. She cleared the rifle with mechanical precision, her face carved from stone, betraying nothing. But Reeves could see the tremor in her fingers, the too quick breathing, the slight glaze in her eyes that spoke of someone fighting an internal battle no one else could see. She emerged from the kill house into the bright sunlight, and the other trainees turned away, unable or unwilling to watch another failure. Maya walked to the equipment rack and secured her rifle, her movements precise despite the shaking hands. 47, Morrison muttered beside Reeves. Sir, we need to cut her loose. This is beyond our scope. She needs therapy, not SEAL training. Reeves finally lowered his binoculars. He'd made a decision. Get Chen to my office, he said quietly. Now. Morrison blinked. Sir, if you're planning to counsel her out, I can handle the paperwork. I'm not counseling her out, Lieutenant. I'm going to fix her. With respect, Commander, you're not a therapist. Reeves smiled, but there was no humor in it. No, but I am a SEAL, and I've seen that look before, the one in Chen's eyes. She's not afraid of combat, Morrison. She's afraid of something else entirely, and I'm going to find out what. He turned and descended the tower stairs, leaving Morrison staring after him in confusion. In the equipment room, Maya stood alone, gripping the edge of a table, forcing her breathing to slow, forcing the tremors to stop. She'd failed again. 47 consecutive failures. The rational part of her mind knew she should quit, should accept that maybe this wasn't meant for her. But the stubborn part, the part that had survived Brooklyn's streets as a cop, that had talked down armed suspects and saved lives, refused to surrender. Petty Officer Chen, a voice cut through her thoughts. Commander Reeves wants to see you, now. Maya straightened, her face carefully neutral. This was it then, the official dismissal she'd been expecting for weeks. She followed the messenger across the compound toward the command building, each step feeling like walking toward an execution. Other trainees watched her pass, their expressions mixtures of pity and relief that it was her getting cut, not them. Maya climbed the stairs to Reeves's office, knocked twice and heard the gruff command, "Enter." She stepped inside and came to attention, eyes fixed on the wall behind Reeves's desk as he sat studying a file. Her file, she realized. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then he closed the folder, opened his desk drawer, and withdrew something that made Maya's breath catch. It was a pistol, a well-worn Sig Sauer P226 with custom grips, the finish worn smooth from years of use. Reeves placed it carefully on the desk between them, the weapon pointing neither at her nor away, simply present. At ease, Chen, Reeves said. We need to talk. Maya relaxed her stance slightly, but her eyes remained fixed on that point behind his head, as military protocol demanded. She couldn't quite keep her gaze from flickering to the pistol, though. Do you know what this is? Reeves asked, gesturing to the Sig Sauer. A service weapon, sir. Not just any service weapon, my service weapon. This pistol has been with me for 23 years. It saved my life 4 times, Okinawa, Baghdad twice, and Kandahar. It's killed 11 people, not targets, Chen, people. Human beings who were trying to kill me or my teammates. Do you understand what I'm telling you? Maya's throat was dry. Yes, sir. I don't think you do. Reeves leaned back in his chair, his eyes never leaving her face. So let me be crystal clear. This weapon represents every life-or-death decision I've made in combat, every moment where hesitation would have meant death, every split-second choice between survival and failure. And right now, I'm going to place this weapon in your hands. He pushed the pistol across the desk toward her. Pick it up. Maya's hands trembled as she reached for the Sig Sauer. The metal was warm, the grip worn smooth. It felt heavy with more than just physical weight. "Now," Reeves said, his voice softer but no less intense, "tell me the truth. Why are you really failing?" Maya's fingers tightened around the grip of Commander Reeves's pistol, feeling the worn texture where his hands had held it through years of combat. The weight of it seemed to anchor her to the present moment, cutting through the fog of shame and exhaustion that had become her constant companion. "Because I'm afraid, sir," she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Wrong." The single word cracked through the office like a gunshot. Reeves leaned forward, his elbows on the desk, his gaze boring into her. "Fear is physiological. Everyone feels it. I've seen men who have earned silver stars shake like leaves before operations. Fear doesn't make you freeze for 5 seconds while hostile targets remain unengaged. Something else does. So I'll ask you again, and this time I want the truth. Why are you failing?" Maya's jaw clenched. She wanted to give him the answer he was looking for, whatever that was, but she didn't know what it was herself. The trembling in her hands had spread to her arms. "Look at you," Reeves said, not unkindly. "Right now, holding that weapon, you're shaking, but I've watched you shoot expert scores on the range. I've watched you field strip an M4 in 23 seconds blindfolded. I've read your tactical analysis papers, their graduate-level work. So the weapon isn't the problem. The skill isn't the problem. What is?" "I don't know, sir," Maya said, frustration bleeding into her voice. "I've asked myself that question every single night for 47 days. Reeves stood and walked to the window overlooking the training compound. For a long moment, he was silent, watching other trainees run through their drills with the casual competence that seemed to elude Maya when it mattered most. "I pulled your complete file," he said finally. "Not just your Navy record, everything. Before you enlisted, you were NYPD, Brooklyn North Precinct. 5 years on patrol, 2 years as a crisis negotiator. Excellent service record." He turned back to face her. "On March 15, 2023, you were first responder to a barricaded suspect situation. Do you remember?" Maya's breath caught. She remembered. God, how could she forget? 3 hostages, Reeves continued, reading from a document he pulled from her file. "One armed perpetrator, Marcus Williams, 34, history of domestic violence and previous weapons charges. He'd barricaded himself and his ex-wife and her 2 children in an apartment on the 4th floor. Initial responding officers called for backup and negotiators, but Williams fired 3 shots through the door, stated he would kill everyone if police didn't withdraw." The memories flooded back. The narrow hallway, the smell of gunpowder, the sound of children crying behind that door. "Officer Maya Chen," Reeves read, defying orders to wait for the negotiation team, approached the door alone and unarmed. She spoke with Williams for 47 minutes, interesting number that, and successfully talked him into releasing the children first, then the ex-wife, and finally surrendering himself without further violence. "You received a department commendation for bravery and de-escalation under extreme circumstances." Reeves set down the document and fixed Maya with an intense stare. "That woman, the one who walked toward gunfire to save 3 strangers, she doesn't sound like someone who freezes when things get dangerous. So explain to me how that same woman can't pull a trigger on a paper target in a training exercise." The question hung in the air like a challenge. Maya felt something crack open inside her chest, a truth she'd been avoiding, buried under weeks of failure and self-doubt. "Because they were real," she said quietly. "The hostages were real people I could save. Williams was a real person I could talk to, understand, negotiate with. There was a purpose to every action, every word. I knew why I was there. I knew what mattered." She set the pistol down on the desk, her hands still trembling. "Here in training, it's just drills, scenarios, pop-up targets that mean nothing, simulated gunfire that isn't a real threat, objectives that don't actually matter. And I stand there knowing it's all fake, all meaningless practice, and I can't." She struggled for the words. I can't make my body believe it's important enough to fight through the fear. I can't make myself care enough to pull the trigger when I know nothing real is at stake." Reeves was silent for a long moment, studying her with an expression she couldn't read. Then, unexpectedly, he smiled. Not a comforting smile, but one that suggested he'd just confirmed a hypothesis. "Chen, what if I told you that's not a weakness? What if I told you that need for purpose, for real stakes, for genuine consequence, that's actually one of the most valuable traits a special operator can have?" Maya looked up, confused. "Sir, I don't understand. I've failed every combat drill for 47 days, yes, I'm aware. But you've succeeded at every single planning exercise, every tactical analysis, every strategic assessment. You know why? Because those exercises simulate real-world problems. They have context. They have purpose. You excel when you understand the why behind the what." He picked up his pistol, checked it with the unconscious efficiency of decades of practice, and held it out to her again. Standard training tries to make you comfortable with violence through repetition and desensitization. It doesn't work for everyone. Some operators need a different approach. They need to understand the purpose behind every action. They need real stakes, real consequences, real missions. He paused. They need what you need. Maya took the weapon again, feeling its weight settle into her palm. "I don't have the luxury of creating real combat situations for training purposes," Reeves continued. "But I do have something else. Starting tomorrow morning, 4:30 hours, you're going to report to Section 7, the restricted area on the north side of the compound. You're going to work directly with me on a special training protocol." "What kind of protocol, sir?" Reeves's expression grew serious. "The kind where failure has real consequences, where success matters to real people in real danger. You say you can't make yourself believe training matters. Fine. Then we won't train, we'll operate." Maya's heart began to pound, but this time it wasn't fear, it was something else. Anticipation, hope maybe. "I don't understand, sir. How can we operate from a training facility?" "You let me worry about that." Reeves walked to his office door and opened it, a clear dismissal. "4:30 hours, Section 7, don't be late, and Chen," he gestured to the pistol still in her hands, "keep it. For the next 2 weeks that weapon stays with you at all times. I want you to feel its weight, understand what it represents. It's not a tool for shooting paper targets. It's an instrument of purpose, the last resort between innocent lives and those who would harm them." Maya stood, the pistol heavy in her grip. "Sir, I still don't." "Tomorrow, Chen, 4:30, dismissed." She left the office in a daze, the Sig Sauer secured in her holster. As she walked across the compound, other trainees stared, whispering. They'd seen her enter the commander's office and assumed she was being discharged. The fact that she was still here, and now carrying what was clearly Reeves's personal weapon, would fuel speculation for hours. Maya didn't care. For the first time in 47 days, she felt something other than dread about the next morning's training. She felt curious, energized. That night she lay in her bunk, the pistol on the small table beside her, and tried to imagine what Reeves had planned. Real operations from a training facility. Real stakes. It seemed impossible. But then again, so did talking down an armed suspect while unarmed. So did saving 3 lives through nothing but words and conviction. Maybe, just maybe, Commander Reeves had found a way to give her what she needed. A reason to fight that went beyond herself. At 4:15 the next morning, Maya was already dressed and ready, the Sig Sauer holstered at her side. She made her way through the pre-dawn darkness to Section 7, an area of the base she'd never accessed before. High fences, security checkpoints, and signs warning of restricted access. A guard checked her ID, made a phone call, and waved her through. Beyond the fence, Commander Reeves was waiting. But he wasn't alone. 6 men stood with him in full tactical gear, their faces painted with camouflage, weapons that looked far more serious than standard training equipment held with casual competence. These weren't instructors. These were operators, real SEALs, battle-hardened and dangerous. Reeves saw her approach and nodded once. "Good, you're early. That's a start." He gestured to the men behind him. "Chen, meet your new training team. These men are active-duty SEALs between deployment rotations. They volunteered to help with an experimental training protocol." He paused, his eyes intense in the growing dawn light. "For the next 2 weeks you won't be running drills, Petty Officer Chen. You'll be running real operations. And if you fail, people will die. Welcome to purpose-driven training. Let's see if you can handle it." The 6 SEALs stood in a semicircle around Maya, their faces painted with camouflage that made them look like predators emerging from shadows. None of them smiled. None of them offered reassuring words. They simply assessed her with the cold professionalism of men who'd seen real combat and had no patience for weakness. Commander Reeves gestured toward a low concrete building behind them, its windows blacked out, satellite dishes bristling from its roof. "Inside, we have work to do." Maya followed, her hand unconsciously touching the Sig Sauer at her hip, a gesture that was becoming familiar, almost comforting. The building's interior was a stark contrast to the Spartan training facilities she'd grown accustomed to. Multiple computer screens displayed satellite feeds, tactical maps, and real-time intelligence data. It looked less like a training room and more like a forward operating base command center. One of the SEALs, a lean man with a scar bisecting his left eyebrow, stepped forward. "Petty Officer First Class Ramirez," he introduced himself, his voice carrying a slight Texas drawl. "I run tactical analysis for DEVGRU operations in the Middle East. What you're about to see is classified top secret. You've been temporarily granted clearance for training purposes. Break that clearance and you'll spend the next decade in Leavenworth." "Clear." "Crystal clear," Maya replied, her spine straightening. Reeves moved to the largest screen and pulled up satellite imagery. Maya's breath caught as she recognized the terrain: desert landscape, scattered buildings, the distinctive architecture of northern Syria. 72 hours ago," Reeves began, his voice taking on the clipped tone of a mission briefing, 4 humanitarian aid workers were taken hostage by an ISIS splinter cell operating near the Turkish border. 2 Americans, 1 British national, 1 German. The hostage takers have made no demands, which intelligence suggests they're planning an execution video. He zoomed in on a compound surrounded by desert scrubland. "This is where we believe they're being held. Joint Special Operations Command has authorized a rescue attempt. Lieutenant Commander Jason Hayes and his team are currently in theater, planning the assault. They move in 60 hours. Maya studied the imagery, her mind automatically cataloging details. 3 buildings arranged in a U-shape around a central courtyard. Limited access points. High walls providing cover but also restricting movement. Her fingers itched for a pen and paper to start mapping approach vectors. "Here's where you come in," Reeves continued. "Hayes and his team are running their own tactical analysis, but they've agreed to consider outside perspectives. You're going to provide that perspective. You're going to plan this operation from the ground up, approach routes, breach points, casualty evacuation, everything." Another SEAL stepped forward, older than the others, with gray threading through his close-cropped hair. "Chief Kowalski, Hostage Rescue Specialist. I've run 37 extractions in hostile territory. Your plan needs to account for hostage psychology, potential Stockholm Syndrome, medical trauma, and the fact that terrified civilians don't follow instructions well under fire." Maya nodded, absorbing the information. Her mind was already racing through scenarios, contingencies, variables. "But here's the critical part," Reeves said, his eyes locking onto hers. "This isn't just a planning exercise. Once you've developed your tactical approach, you're going to execute it here in our training compound. We've already begun constructing a replica of the target compound based on the satellite imagery. Same dimensions, same layout, same approach angles." Ramirez pulled up architectural schematics on another screen. We'll run the operation in real-time parallel with Hayes's team. You'll have live communication with them. Your decisions, your tactics, your approach, all of it will be shared with the team on the ground. If you identify something they've missed, if you solve a problem they haven't considered, it could save lives. The weight of it settled over Maya like a physical thing. This wasn't simulation. This wasn't practice. This was real intelligence, a real hostage situation, real lives hanging in the balance. "And if I fail?" she asked, her voice steady despite the anxiety clawing at her chest. "Then you fail," Reeves said bluntly. "But your failure won't doom the mission. Hayes has his own plan, his own team. However, you'll know that your analysis, your execution, your performance could have made a difference and didn't. You'll know that your freeze, your fear, your inability to pull the trigger might have cost insights that could have saved lives." He moved closer, his voice dropping. "This is what you said you needed, Chen: purpose, real stakes, consequences that matter. Well, here they are. 4 innocent people are going to die unless someone rescues them. Hayes and his team will do their best, but they're going in with incomplete information, limited resources, and a ticking clock. You have the chance to help them. The question is, can you?" Maya stared at the satellite imagery, at the compound where 4 people were being held, where in 60 hours violence would erupt and lives would be decided by split-second decisions and careful planning. The familiar fear tried to rise in her throat, but something else rose with it, something she hadn't felt in 47 days. Determination. "When do we start?" she asked. Reeves smiled, the expression almost predatory. "We already have. The clock is running. 60 hours until Hayes moves. That's how long you have to plan a perfect operation." The next 12 hours became a blur of intense analysis. The 6 SEALs rotated through, each offering expertise from different specialties. Ramirez walked her through Syrian compound architecture, explaining how ISIS cells typically fortified positions. Kowalski discussed hostage psychology and the medical considerations of people who'd been held in harsh conditions for 3 days. A SEAL named Martinez, who barely spoke but moved with coiled intensity, taught her about explosive breaching, where to place charges for maximum effect with minimum risk to hostages. Another, Thompson, specialized in sniper overwatch and explained sight lines, kill zones, and how to establish security perimeters in hostile territory. But they didn't just lecture. They questioned. They challenged. They forced Maya to defend every assumption, justify every decision. "Why approach from the north?" Ramirez demanded, pointing at her proposed route. "Because the satellite imagery shows a blind spot in their sentry pattern between 200 and 400 hours, Maya replied, pulling up thermal imaging data. "Look here. The guards rotate every 2 hours, and there's a 7-minute gap where this section has no visual coverage. And if they've changed their pattern since this image was taken. Then we have secondary and tertiary approach routes from the west and south," Maya said, already pulling up alternatives, each with their own timing windows and contingencies. Kowalski leaned over her shoulder, studying her hostage extraction plan. "You've got a 90-second window to move 4 potentially traumatized civilians 300 meters to the extraction point. That's ambitious." "It's necessary," Maya countered. "Any longer and we're exposed to reinforcements from the village 2 kilometers east. Intelligence reports suggest they can mobilize in under 4 minutes once shooting starts." "So you're banking on everything going perfectly?" "No, I'm banking on having contingencies for when it doesn't." Maya pulled up additional plans. "If extraction is compromised, we have 2 fallback positions here and here where we can establish defensive perimeters and call for air support." The questions continued, relentless and unforgiving, but Maya didn't wilt under the pressure. This was different from the kill house drills. This had context. This had purpose. Every decision mattered because real people, 4 terrified aid workers in a Syrian compound, might live or die based on the quality of her analysis. 24 hours into the planning, Reeves entered the briefing room with a tablet. Update from Hayes. The hostage-takers moved 2 additional guards to the compound perimeter. That changes your approach calculations. Maya immediately began revising her plans, her exhaustion forgotten. The SEALs watched her work, their initial skepticism gradually shifting to something else. Respect, maybe, or at least professional acknowledgement. At hour 36, with her eyes burning and her third cup of coffee going cold beside her, Maya made her most critical assessment. "The intelligence is wrong," she said suddenly. The room went quiet. Reeves looked up from his own analysis. "Explain." Maya pulled up the satellite imagery alongside the intelligence reports. "The reports say the hostages are being held in the Eastern Building, but look at the thermal imaging. The Eastern Building shows consistent heat signatures, guards, probably, moving on a patrol pattern. The Western Building has minimal thermal reading despite having reinforced walls." She zoomed in on the Western structure. "That building has a cellar. The concrete reinforcement makes thermal imaging unreliable. If I were holding high-value hostages and I knew satellites were watching, I wouldn't keep them where thermal could easily identify them. I'd keep them in the one place thermal imaging is compromised." Ramirez studied the imagery, his expression thoughtful. "That's a significant assumption based on limited data." "It's not just the thermal imaging," Maya pressed. "Look at the guard patterns. They're concentrated around the Eastern Building, too concentrated. It's misdirection. They want us to think that's where the hostages are." Chief Kowalski crossed his arms, his weathered face skeptical. "You're suggesting we completely revise the approach based on what amounts to educated guesswork." "If you're wrong, Chen, and the team wastes precious seconds searching the wrong building, while the hostages are being executed in the Eastern structure." He let the implication hang in the air. Maya felt the familiar tremor start in her hands, but she forced herself to focus on the data, not the fear. "I understand the risk, Chief, but consider the intelligence inconsistencies." She pulled up a series of reports on the main screen. Initial drone surveillance counted 15 hostiles. Latest pass counted 23. That's a 53% increase that intelligence didn't predict. Their information is incomplete. She zoomed in on the compound layout. The Eastern Building has large windows, multiple entry points, minimal fortification. The Western Building is reinforced concrete, limited access, a defensive nightmare. Which one makes more tactical sense for holding high-value prisoners? Ramirez leaned forward, studying the comparison. "She's got a point. We've seen this pattern before in Mosul and Raqqa. ISIS learns. They know we have satellite coverage. They know we use thermal imaging. Adaptive concealment isn't new for them." "It's still speculation," Martinez said quietly, speaking for the first time in hours. "Dangerous speculation when lives are at stake." Maya turned to face the assembled SEALs. "Then we plan for both scenarios. Primary assault assumes Western Building, hostages in the cellar. Secondary assault simultaneously clears Eastern Building. We don't commit fully to either assumption until we have visual confirmation on the ground." Reeves had been silent throughout the exchange, watching Maya defend her analysis with increasing intensity. Now he spoke. "That splits your force, divides your firepower. In a hot extraction, that's a risk." "It's a calculated risk," Maya countered. "Better than committing everything to the wrong building and realizing too late. Hayes's team is 8 operators. 4 hit the Western Building, 3 clear the Eastern, 1 provides overwatch and coordinates. Once hostages are located, the teams converge for extraction." She pulled up her revised tactical plan, routes and timings color-coded and precise. "It adds 17 seconds to the operation if I'm right about the Western Building. It adds 43 seconds if I'm wrong and they're in the Eastern. But either way, we don't leave anything unchecked." The room fell silent as the SEALs studied her plan. Maya could feel her heart pounding. could feel the weight of judgment from men who'd earned their positions through blood and fire. She was a trainee who'd failed 47 consecutive drills, trying to tell decorated warriors how to run a hostage rescue. The absurdity of it should have paralyzed her. Instead, she felt clearer than she had in months. Solid tactical thinking, Kowalski finally admitted. Flexible, accounts for uncertainty. I've seen worse plans from people with a lot more experience. Ramirez nodded slowly. The split approach is risky, but the logic is sound. If Hayes agrees, it could work. Reeves stood, pulling out a satellite phone. Then let's find out what Hayes thinks. It's his team, his mission. He gets final say. He dialed, putting the phone on speaker. After 2 rings, a rough voice answered, American accent with a hint of southern drawl. Hayes. Commander, it's Reeves at Coronado. I've got our analyst here with a significant tactical revision to your operation. I'm putting her on. Maya's mouth went dry as Reeves handed her the phone. She was about to second-guess an active SEAL team commander on an actual rescue operation. The scope of that responsibility hit her like a physical blow. This is Petty Officer Chen, sir, she managed, her voice steadier than she felt. Chen, you're the analyst who thinks my hostages are in a different building than intelligence suggests. Hayes's tone was neutral, revealing nothing. I read the preliminary brief Reeves sent. Walk me through your reasoning, and don't waste my time with hedging. I need your honest assessment. Maya took a breath and launched into her analysis, explaining the thermal imaging discrepancies, the guard concentration patterns, the reinforced cellar, the ISIS tactical evolution she'd studied. Hayes interrupted occasionally with sharp questions that cut straight to the assumptions underlying her conclusions. Structural integrity of the Western building, if we breach with explosives. Reinforced concrete can handle a controlled breach without collapse, sir. Martinez confirmed the charge calculations. Evacuation routes, if we're taking fire from the village reinforcements. 2 primary, 1 tertiary, all mapped with timing windows. I can send the full breakdown. Time penalty if you're wrong, and we clear the wrong building first. Maya hesitated, then committed. 43 seconds, sir. But if I'm right, we save 17 seconds and avoid a potential ambush in the eastern building. Silence stretched across the satellite connection. Maya could hear wind in the background, the distant sound of voices. Hayes was somewhere in Syria, probably looking at the same compound imagery she was studying, weighing the same impossible decisions. 17 seconds doesn't sound like much, Hayes finally said. In a hostage rescue, sir, 17 seconds can be the difference between success and bodies on the floor. Another pause, then, you're right about that. Here's what I need you to understand, Chen. I've got 8 men with me. Good men. The best. If I revise this plan based on your analysis and you're wrong, if we spend precious time searching that cellar while hostages are dying 50 meters away in the eastern building, those men will have to live with that failure. I'll have to live with it. Can you live with it if you're wrong? The question cut through everything, the tactical analysis, the satellite imagery, the careful planning. This was the moment Reeves had engineered, the test he designed specifically for her. Could she make a call with real consequences? Could she stand behind her judgment when lives depended on it? Maya looked at the satellite image of the compound, at the western building with its reinforced walls and suspicious lack of thermal signatures. She thought about 4 terrified aid workers who'd gone to Syria to help people and ended up as prisoners. She thought about Hayes and his team, professional warriors who would execute whatever plan they committed to with absolute precision. And she thought about the pattern she'd seen in the data, the tactical logic that made sense to her even though she couldn't prove it with certainty. Sir, I'm 70% confident the hostages are in the western building cellar, she said clearly. 30% they're split between buildings. 5% they've been moved entirely. I can't give you certainty. I can only give you my best analysis based on available intelligence. But yes, sir. If I'm wrong, I'll live with that. Because the alternative is giving you incomplete analysis because I was afraid of being wrong. The satellite connection crackled with static. Maya could hear her own heartbeat in the silence. Then Hayes spoke, and there was something in his voice that might have been approval. Honesty, I appreciate that, Chen. Most analysts give me certainty they don't actually have. You're giving me probability and owning the uncertainty. That's worth something. He paused. We're revising the plan to account for your dual building scenario. Split team approach exactly as you outlined. We move in 36 hours. Your team at Coronado will run the parallel exercise simultaneously. Yes, sir. And Chen, Commander Reeves tells me you have trouble pulling the trigger in training scenarios. Maya's face flushed. Even 7,000 miles away, her failures had followed her. Yes, sir. Well, in 36 hours, when my men are taking real fire in that compound, I need you pulling triggers in California like it matters. Because it does. Your mental rehearsal of this operation needs to be flawless so that when we debrief, when we compare what you did to what we did, we learn something that might save lives on the next operation. Do you understand what I'm telling you? Maya understood. Hayes was giving her what she'd needed all along, not just purpose, but accountability. Her performance wouldn't determine the success or failure of his mission, but it would inform future operations, future planning, future lives saved or lost. I understand, sir. I won't freeze. See that you don't. Fear is just information, Chen. It tells you something might go wrong. Use that information, don't let it use you. Hayes out. The connection ended. Maya stood holding the satellite phone, feeling the weight of the commitment she'd just made to a SEAL commander she'd never met, for an operation that would unfold in a Syrian desert while she ran a parallel version in California. Reeves took the phone back, studying her face. 36 hours. You need to finalize every detail, commit it all to memory, and prepare to execute flawlessly. Think you can do that? Maya looked at the satellite imagery one more time, then at the 6 SEALs who'd been drilling her relentlessly for the past 36 hours. These men had seen real combat, had faced the exact kind of chaos she'd be simulating, and they were trusting her analysis enough to validate it through parallel execution. Yes, sir, she said, I can do that. Then let's get to work, Reeves said. Because in 36 hours, 4 people's lives depend on whether you're right, and whether you can finally pull that trigger when it matters. The next 36 hours dissolved into a blur of memorization, rehearsal, and refinement. Maya slept in 90-minute intervals when Reeves ordered her to, forced herself to eat when Ramirez shoved protein bars into her hands, and spent every other moment etching the compound layout into her memory until she could navigate it blindfolded. The Coronado mock-up rose from the desert floor like a ghost of the Syrian original. Base engineers worked around the clock, constructing plywood and canvas structures with dimensions accurate to within 6 inches. The building stood hollow and skeletal in the California darkness, but they were positioned exactly right. The same distances, the same angles, the same defensive challenges as the compound 7,000 miles away. At hour 34, Maya stood in the center of the mock-up courtyard, turning slowly to orient herself. Ramirez appeared beside her, his face already painted with camouflage that made him look like something conjured from shadows. 2 hours, he said quietly. Hayes and his team are moving into position now. We'll execute simultaneously, his operation in real time, ours as an exact parallel. Every decision you make will communicate to his team. Every decision they make, you'll hear through your earpiece. Maya nodded, checking her equipment for the dozenth time. M4 carbine fully loaded with live ammunition, not blanks, not marking rounds, but actual bullets. Commander Reeves's Sig Sauer holstered at her side, its familiar weight grounding her. Night vision equipment, radio with encrypted satellite link, breaching charges in her tactical vest. This wasn't a drill. The ammunition was real. The explosives were real. The 6 SEALs forming her team were real operators who would move with lethal precision. The only thing that wasn't real was the enemy. Base personnel would play the role of ISIS fighters and hostages, but they'd be armed with marking rounds that would leave paint instead of bodies. Still, Maya's hands were steady as she loaded her weapon. The tremor that had plagued her for 47 days was absent. In its place was a focused calm that reminded her of talking down Marcus Williams in that Brooklyn apartment, the clarity that came when purpose overrode fear. 1 hour, Reeves's voice crackled through her earpiece. He was in the observation tower with Morrison, watching through thermal optics and coordinating communications with Hayes's team. Final equipment check, then radio silence until execution. Maya ran through her checklist one last time. Magazine seated, safety off, night vision calibrated, breaching charges tested. She felt her team assembling around her in the darkness. Ramirez, Kowalski, Martinez, Thompson, and 2 others whose names she'd memorized along with their specialties. These men didn't have to be here. They were between deployments, theoretically on rest rotation. But Reeves had asked, and they'd volunteered to help train a washout who'd failed every drill for 47 consecutive days. Now that washout was about to lead them into a parallel operation that would unfold simultaneously with a real hostage rescue. 30 minutes, Hayes's voice came through the satellite link and Maya's heart rate spiked. She could hear the tension in his tone, the controlled breathing of a man preparing for violence. We have visual on the compound. Count 6 sentries on perimeter, consistent with latest intelligence. No change in patrol pattern. Maya keyed her radio. Copy that, Commander. We're in position. 6 role players positioned as sentries in our mock-up, matching your count. Good, Chen, I want you to understand something. Hayes paused and she could hear boots crunching on sand. My team has run hostage rescues in 14 countries. We've seen every variation of compound architecture, every defensive configuration. Your analysis identified patterns we missed. The split building approach adds operational complexity, but the tactical logic is sound. Whatever happens in the next hour, you've already proven your value. The words should have reassured her. Instead, they increased the pressure. Hayes was giving her credit before the operation even started, which meant expectations were higher. Thank you, sir. We won't let you down. See that you don't. 15 minutes to execution. Hayes out. Maya settled into her position at the edge of the mock-up compound, her team spread out in assault formation. Through her night vision, the world became shades of green, the plywood structures glowing with the heat signatures of the role players inside. She could see the sentries walking their patrol routes, exactly as Hayes would be seeing real ISIS fighters 7,000 miles away. The parallel was eerie, 2 operations unfolding in perfect synchronization, one with paint rounds and role players, one with bullets and real consequences. 10 minutes, Reeves announced. Chen, you're cleared to command. This is your operation. Maya's finger rested on her trigger guard. The old fear tried to surface. What if she froze? What if her analysis was wrong? What if she led her team into failure while Hayes's team was fighting for their lives? Then she remembered something Hayes had said. Fear is just information. She examined the fear, asked it what it was trying to tell her. It said, this is important. People's lives matter. You could fail. And Maya answered, yes, that's exactly why I'm here. 5 minutes, Hayes's voice crackled. Final approach. Radio discipline from here. Next transmission will be execute order. Maya's team tightened their formation. She could feel their presence in the darkness, professional, competent, trusting her judgment enough to follow her into this parallel operation. 2 minutes, Reeves said. Thermal imaging shows all role players in position. Western building cellar has 4 signatures matching hostage positions. Eastern building has 3 signatures matching guard positions. The setup matches your prediction, Chen. She'd been right. The hostages were in the western building cellar, just as she'd calculated. The knowledge should have brought relief, but all Maya felt was heightened awareness. Being right about the intelligence didn't guarantee successful execution. 90 seconds. Through her earpiece, Maya could hear Hayes's breathing, could hear the whispered communications of his team moving into final assault positions. Somewhere in Syria, 8 American warriors were about to storm a compound held by violent extremists. 4 innocent people's lives depended on their success. And here in California, Maya Chen, who had failed 47 consecutive combat drills, was about to lead a parallel assault that would inform future operations and prove whether she could finally pull the trigger when it mattered. 60 seconds, stand by. Maya's world narrowed to the green-tinted view through her night vision. She could see the nearest sentry, 50 meters away, walking his patrol route with the casual confidence of someone who didn't know death was approaching. In Syria, Hayes's team would be seeing the same thing. Real sentries, real weapons, real stakes. 30 seconds, prepare to breach. Maya hand-signaled her team. Ramirez and Kowalski moved toward the western building. Martinez positioned himself for overwatch. Thompson prepared breaching charges. The choreography was perfect, practiced, professional. 15 seconds. Maya's finger moved from the trigger guard to the trigger itself. She could feel her heartbeat, steady and strong. No tremor in her hands, no paralysis creeping through her limbs, just focused readiness. 10 seconds. Through her earpiece, she could hear Hayes counting down in Syria. His count matched Reeves's count in California. The 2 operations synchronized across 7,000 miles and 11 time zones. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Hayes's voice cut through the night like a blade. Execute, execute, execute. The world erupted into violence. In Syria and California simultaneously, flashbang grenades detonated with percussive force that shook the air. Maya's team moved as one coordinated organism, breaching the compound perimeter with practiced efficiency. The sentries in the mock-up turned, raising their weapons. Maya engaged the nearest one without hesitation, 2 controlled pairs, center mass, exactly as she'd been trained. Paint rounds marked her target. The role player dropped, playing dead. No freeze, no paralysis, just execution. Perimeter breached, Maya reported, her voice steady as she advanced, moving to primary structure. In her ear, Hayes, perimeter breached, 3 hostiles down, moving to western building. The parallel was exact. Maya reached the western building entrance, where Thompson had already placed breaching charges. She stacked her team on the door, Ramirez, Kowalski, herself, Martinez providing rear security. Breach in 3, 2, 1. The explosion was controlled but violent, the door disintegrating in a shower of splinters. Maya flowed through the opening, her rifle tracking for targets. 2 role players emerged from the shadows, their weapons raised. She fired, both went down marked with paint. Western building, 2 hostiles neutralized, she reported. Hayes's voice slightly breathless. Western building, 3 hostiles neutralized. Stairway to cellar located, descending. Maya found the corresponding stairway in the mock-up, narrow and steep, leading down into darkness. This was the critical moment, the confined space where her analysis would prove right or catastrophically wrong. She descended, her night vision revealing the cellar's layout. 4 figures huddled against the far wall, hoods over their heads, hands bound, the role players representing hostages. In Syria, Hayes was seeing the same thing, real hostages, real terror, real lives about to be saved or lost. Hostages located, Maya reported, her voice catching with emotion she couldn't quite suppress. Western building cellar, 4 individuals bound but mobile. Hayes's voice exploded through the satellite link, triumph cutting through the operational tension. Confirm hostages located. Western building cellar exactly as Chen predicted. 4 individuals, American and European nationals confirmed, securing now. Relief flooded through Maya, but she didn't allow it to slow her movements. She approached the role players, cutting their bindings while Kowalski established security on the stairway. Hostages secured, she reported, beginning extraction. In her ear haze, hostages secured. Chen, your analysis was dead on, moving to extraction point Alpha. The next 3 minutes were controlled chaos, moving 4 shell-shocked role players through the compound, while Martinez provided covering fire from his overwatch position. Paint rounds sparked against the plywood structures as base personnel playing ISIS fighters attempted to complicate the extraction. Maya's team moved through the mock-up compound in a coordinated ballet of violence and precision. Paint rounds zipped past her head as role players emerged from the eastern building, the contingency she'd planned for. They'd cleared the western building, but the compound wasn't secure. "Contact east," Martinez called from his overwatch position. 3 hostiles engaging from the secondary structure. In her earpiece, Hayes's voice echoed the same report from Syria. "Contact east, multiple hostiles from the village reinforcements. We're taking fire." The parallel operations had diverged slightly. Real combat never matched planning perfectly, but the core situation remained the same. Both teams were extracting hostages under fire with enemy reinforcements closing in. Maya made a split-second decision. Ramirez, Kowalski, get the hostages to extraction point Alpha. Thompson, Martinez with me. We're establishing a defensive perimeter to buy them time. She didn't wait for confirmation, just moved toward the eastern building where muzzle flashes strobed in the darkness. Her M4 barked 3 times, paint marking role players who dropped with theatrical efficiency. But more kept coming. The scenario designers had built in the chaos Hayes would be facing in Syria. "Chen, you're exposed." Reeves's voice cut through her earpiece, sharp with concern. "Fall back to." "Negative," Maya interrupted, firing again. "Hostages need 90 seconds to reach extraction. We hold here." In Syria, Hayes was making the same calculation. "We hold this position. Hostages are moving. We give them time." Thompson appeared beside Maya, his weapon adding to the suppressive fire. Martinez shifted his overwatch position, taking out role players trying to flank their position. The mock-up compound lit up with simulated explosions, smoke grenades filling the air with choking gray clouds. This was chaos. This was the unpredictable nature of combat that no amount of planning could fully account for. And Maya was in the center of it, making decisions without freezing, pulling her trigger without hesitation. "Hostages at extraction point," Ramirez reported. "We're clear." "All teams collapse to extraction," Maya ordered, firing a final burst before falling back. Her team moved in coordinated retreat, covering each other's withdrawal with practiced efficiency. They reached the extraction point, a cleared area where in the real operation helicopters would be landing. In the mock-up, it was just marked ground, but the principle was the same. "All personnel accounted for," Maya reported, breathing hard, her weapon still raised and scanning for threats. "Hostages secure, team intact, area controlled." In her ear, the sound of rotor blades cutting through Syrian air, Hayes shouting over the noise. "Hostages on bird. We're Oscar Mike, extraction complete." The satellite link crackled with celebration. Hayes's team had successfully rescued all 4 aid workers. 0 friendly casualties. The operation was a complete success. Maya lowered her weapon, and the reality of what had just happened crashed over her. She'd run a parallel operation to an actual SEAL team hostage rescue. She'd made tactical decisions that informed real-world actions. She'd led a team through a complex scenario without freezing once. And her analysis had been correct. The hostages had been exactly where she'd predicted. But Reeves's voice brought her back to earth. "Chen, command center, now." The debriefing lasted 6 hours. Hayes called in via satellite link, walking through every decision point, every moment where Maya's analysis had informed their approach. The thermal imaging interpretation, the split building assault strategy, the extraction route that had minimized exposure to reinforcements. Your tactical assessment saved us at least 2 minutes of search time, Hayes said, his voice carrying the exhaustion of a man who just survived combat. In a hostage rescue, 2 minutes is the difference between success and finding bodies. You did good work, Chen. Real good work. The praise should have felt triumphant. Instead, Maya felt drained, aware that this had been the ideal scenario, perfect intelligence, clear mission parameters, and execution that went almost exactly to plan. After the call ended, Reeves dismissed everyone except Maya. They sat alone in the command center, the screens now dark, the satellite feeds terminated. You performed adequately when you had perfect information and a clear mission, Reeves said, his tone neither congratulatory nor critical. You had real stakes, real purpose, real people depending on your decisions, and you didn't freeze. That's significant progress. He stood, moving to look out the window at the dawn breaking over Coronado. But here's what you need to understand, Chen. That was the easy version. Real combat isn't a planning exercise where everything goes according to your analysis. It's chaos. It's incomplete information and things going catastrophically wrong. It's doing everything right and watching people die anyway. He turned to face her, his expression grave. Tomorrow you go back to the regular training pipeline. No more special scenarios. No more direct purpose I can hand you. You'll run the same drills as everyone else. The boring, repetitive, seemingly meaningless exercises that every warrior has to master. And most of them won't have clear operational relevance. The question is, can you perform when the only thing at stake is your own progression? When there's no Lieutenant Commander Hayes depending on your analysis? When it's just you, a kill house, and the need to prove you belong here? Maya felt the familiar anxiety start to creep back. The Syria operation had been extraordinary, a once-in-a-career training opportunity that Reeves had engineered specifically for her. But that wasn't sustainable. She couldn't rely on real-world operations to motivate her through every training exercise. I don't know, sir, she admitted, but I want to find out. Reeves studied her for a long moment, then nodded. Good answer. Because tomorrow morning, 5:30 hours, you're back in formation with the other trainees. You'll run the standard kill house drill, the same one you failed 16 times. No parallel operations, no satellite links, no real hostages, just you and the training scenario. He walked to the door, then paused. The Syria operation proved you can perform under ideal conditions with maximum motivation. Tomorrow will prove whether you've actually changed or whether you just had one good day. Get some sleep, Chen. You've earned it, but don't get comfortable. The real test starts tomorrow. That night, Maya lay in her bunk, unable to sleep despite her exhaustion. Commander Reeves's Sig Sauer sat on the table beside her, a reminder of purpose and responsibility. She'd carried it through the Syria operation, had felt its weight as a constant reminder that she was doing something that mattered. But tomorrow, it would just be a training drill. No real consequences. No lives at stake. Just the same kill house she'd failed 16 times, with the same pop-up targets and simulated gunfire that had always made her freeze. Could she do it? Could she pull the trigger when the only thing motivating her was her own need to succeed? She picked up the pistol, feeling its familiar weight. Reeves had told her it represented purpose, the last resort between innocent lives and those who would harm them. But what did it represent when there were no innocent lives immediately at stake, when it was just training? Maya turned the question over in her mind, searching for an answer that would carry her through the next day's drill. Finally, as exhaustion began to overtake her anxiety, she found it. The pistol didn't just represent immediate purpose. It represented readiness, the capacity to act when purpose appeared. and you couldn't manufacture that capacity in the moment. You had to build it through repetition, through the boring drills and seemingly meaningless exercises that created muscle memory and conditioned responses. The Syria operation had been extraordinary, but extraordinary moments were built on foundations of ordinary competence. Maya set the pistol back on the table and closed her eyes. Tomorrow, she would face the kill house again, not as a response to an immediate crisis, but as preparation for crises she couldn't yet imagine. That would have to be purpose enough. At 5:30 hours, she stood in formation with the other trainees, who watched her with new expressions. Word had spread about the classified training exercise, though details remained vague. She was no longer invisible, but she could still see the skepticism. One successful operation didn't erase 47 consecutive failures. "Chen," Lieutenant Morrison called out, his clipboard already in hand. "Kill house. Standard close quarters combat protocol. Let's see if Syria was a fluke or if you've actually learned something." The other trainees exchanged glances. This was the moment of truth. Could Maya Chen perform in a routine drill, or had she simply gotten lucky with perfect conditions? Maya walked toward the kill house, feeling the weight of Reeves's pistol at her hip. She could see the commander in the observation tower, watching through binoculars, his expression unreadable. She entered the structure, her M4 raised, and the familiar layout appeared in her night vision. The same rooms, the same corners, the same challenges she'd failed 16 times before. But something was different now. The first room's target popped up. Maya engaged cleanly, 2 rounds, center mass. The target fell. She moved to the second room, where the recorded machine gun fire had always frozen her before. The audio erupted, deafening and chaotic. For a split second, the old fear reached for her, trying to paralyze her body and scatter her mind. Then Maya remembered Hayes's voice. "Fear is just information." She examined the fear. What was it telling her? That the situation was dangerous, that she needed to respond with precision and speed, that mistakes could cost lives. All true, all useful information. She used it. Maya cleared the second room with controlled aggression, engaging multiple targets while the machine gun recording thundered around her. She didn't freeze. She didn't hesitate. She moved through the scenario like she'd moved through the Syrian compound mock-up, with purpose and precision. The third room presented the impossible scenario she'd encountered before. A hostage positioned directly behind a hostile target, minimal separation, a shot that invited catastrophic failure. In her previous attempts, Maya had frozen here, paralyzed by the fear of making the wrong choice. Maya stared at the impossible shot, the hostile target with the hostage barely visible behind it. In her previous 16 attempts, this moment had been her breaking point. The fear of failure, of making the wrong choice, had paralyzed her completely. But now she remembered something else from the Syria operation. Real combat wasn't about perfect shots. It was about tactical flexibility. Instead of freezing, Maya moved. She shifted laterally, changing her angle, her boots sliding across the floor in a smooth sidestep. The new perspective revealed a clear line of sight, a narrow window between the hostile and the hostage that hadn't existed from her original position. She took the shot, clean hit. The hostile target dropped, the hostage untouched. It cost her 3 seconds on her completion time, 3 seconds of lateral movement instead of immediate engagement. But the hostage survived. Maya cleared the final room and emerged from the kill house, her weapon lowered, her breathing controlled. The morning sun hit her face, and she realized her hands weren't shaking. The tremor that had plagued her for 47 days was absent. Lieutenant Morrison stood waiting with his stopwatch, his expression unreadable. "Time was slow," he said, checking his clipboard. 3 seconds over the threshold for expert completion. Maya's heart sank. Another failure then. Even after Syria, even after everything, she'd still failed to meet the standard. However, Morrison continued, and something in his tone made her look up, you successfully neutralized all hostile targets and preserved all hostages. That's a tactical pass. Moreover, he paused, consulting his notes. You solved the Room 3 scenario using an approach I've never seen in 8 years of running this course. You found an angle that didn't exist in the original course design. From the observation tower, Commander Reeves descended, approaching with measured steps. Morrison handed him the evaluation sheet. Tactical pass, acceptable time, perfect hostage preservation, and innovative problem-solving, Reeves read aloud. Then he looked at Maya, his weathered face showing the ghost of a smile. Not bad for your 17th attempt, Chen. You're dismissed. Get some food, then report back at 1400 hours for the next training block. No congratulations. No celebration. Just acknowledgement that she'd done her job adequately and needed to move on to the next challenge. It was exactly what Maya needed. For the next 3 weeks she passed every drill. Not perfectly. She was still slower than the bigger, stronger trainees. Her marksmanship scores remained in the good range rather than exceptional. She would never be the fastest or the strongest. But she stopped freezing. The other trainees' attitudes shifted gradually from skepticism to grudging respect. She was no longer the weakest link, no longer the ghost people looked through. She was simply another trainee, struggling, improving, pushing forward through the brutal gauntlet of SEAL training. Then came the final major exercise before the selection board would decide who advanced to the actual SEAL qualification course. It was a massive nighttime scenario involving multiple teams, live ammunition, pyrotechnics, and chaos deliberately engineered to push trainees beyond their breaking points. Maya was assigned as team leader for one of the assault elements, a recognition of her improved performance and tactical thinking. Her mission: breach a fortified position, secure a high-value target, and extract under fire. The exercise began at dusk, and everything went wrong immediately. The intelligence package was deliberately flawed. The fortified position had twice as many defenders as briefed. The supporting element that was supposed to suppress enemy fire got bogged down in a simulated minefield. One of Maya's team members, Petty Officer Davis, twisted his ankle during the approach, slowing their entire movement. Then the mortars started falling. Simulated explosions that were real enough, close enough to make the ground shake and fill the air with choking dust and smoke. Maya's radio crackled. Actual casualties reported in Bravo element. Exercise is now live action with simulated wounded. Medical evacuation protocols in effect. Translation: role players were now acting as injured teammates who needed immediate trauma care while under fire. The difficulty had just tripled. Maya's mind raced through the options. They could abort, retreat and regroup, accept a training failure but preserve the simulated safety of their team. They could push forward with the original plan and risk everything in a scenario designed to punish rigid thinking. Or they could adapt. Team, hold position, Maya ordered, her voice cutting through the chaos. Ramirez, you and Kowalski break off. Link up with Bravo element and handle casualty evacuation. The rest of us are changing the approach. She pulled out a tactical map, using her flashlight's red lens to illuminate terrain features. We're not going through the main entrance anymore. Too much simulated fire, too exposed. We're going around, using this ravine for cover. It's a longer route, but we'll maintain the element of surprise. It was a risky call. It meant deviating from the approved plan, splitting her already reduced force, and trusting her instincts over the official training scenario. If it failed, she'd be responsible for a spectacular washout in front of the selection board. But Maya had learned something in the past 3 weeks. Fear was just information. And right now, the information said that following the original plan would lead to simulated disaster. Execute, she ordered. Her team followed her into the ravine without question, a testament to the trust she'd built through consistent performance. They moved through the darkness, the sounds of simulated combat echoing around them. Blank fire cracked overhead. Pyrotechnics simulated explosions. Instructors shouted commands in the roles of enemy combatants. Maya felt the old fear trying to surface, whispering that she was making a mistake, that she should abort and retreat to safety. But she recognized it now for what it was, not a sign of weakness, but her brain trying to keep her safe by highlighting risks. She acknowledged the risks and moved forward anyway. They emerged from the ravine behind the fortified position, exactly as Maya had calculated. She hand-signaled her team into assault positions, then led the breach herself. The interior was chaos, pop-up targets mixed with role players, smoke and strobing lights simulating explosions. And in the center, the high-value target role player surrounded by hostile defenders. Maya moved on pure training now, her mind clear, her movements efficient. She neutralized 3 targets in rapid succession, her team covering her flanks with professional precision. They secured the HVT and began the extraction, moving toward the secondary rally point she designated. That's when the catastrophic failure occurred. The explosion wasn't supposed to happen, not like that. Later, investigators would determine it was a pyrotechnic malfunction. A smoke charge designed to simulate a mortar impact detonated with 3 times the intended force, close enough to knock Maya off her feet and send Petty Officer Davis flying backward into a concrete wall. The chaos of the training scenario evaporated instantly, replaced by real emergency. Davis lay motionless on the ground, blood streaming from his nose, his eyes closed, his breathing shallow and irregular. This wasn't simulation, this wasn't role-playing, this was real. "Corpsman," Maya screamed, the word tearing from her throat as she scrambled toward Davis. "We need a corpsman now." She dropped beside him, her hands reaching for his neck to check his pulse. And that's when everything she'd learned, every successful drill, every moment of progress over the past 3 weeks, threatened to disintegrate. Her hands began to shake, violently, uncontrollably. Her breathing fractured into short, panicked gasps. The fear came roaring back, bigger and darker than it had ever been during training, because this was real. This was what Commander Reeves had warned her about. Doing everything right, and people still getting hurt. Davis wasn't breathing properly. His chest rose and fell irregularly, blood bubbling from his nose. Possible skull fracture, possible internal bleeding, possible spinal injury from the impact with the wall. Maya's mind went blank, the training evaporated, the confidence she'd built shattered like glass. She was going to fail. She was going to watch someone die because she froze, because she wasn't good enough, because when it really mattered, when the stakes were actually real, she couldn't perform. Her hands hovered over Davis, shaking too badly to be useful. She couldn't remember the trauma protocols, couldn't remember what to check first, couldn't remember anything except the crushing certainty that she was failing in the most catastrophic way possible. "Chen," a voice cut through her panic calm, authoritative, familiar. A hand gripped her shoulder, hard enough to hurt, hard enough to anchor her to reality. Commander Jack Reeves knelt beside her in the dust and smoke. When had he arrived? How long had she been frozen? "Chen," he repeated, his voice cutting through the chaos with surgical precision. "Fear is just information. What is it telling you right now?" Maya's voice came out as a broken whisper. "That I can't do this, that he's dying, that it's my fault, that I'm not good enough." "Wrong." Reeves's grip on her shoulder tightened. "Davis is injured because of equipment failure, not your decisions. He's dying because you're having a conversation with me instead of treating him. And you are good enough. You just need to stop thinking about yourself and do your goddamn job." The words were harsh, deliberately brutal, but they snapped something back into place in Maya's mind. She wasn't the priority, Davis was the priority. Her hands stopped shaking. Maya's training flooded back like muscle memory awakening. Her hands moved to Davis's neck, checking for a pulse, strong but rapid, shock setting in. She tilted his head back carefully, mindful of potential spinal injury, clearing his airway as blood continued to flow from his nose. "Breathing is shallow but present," she reported, her voice steady now clinical. "Pulse 120 and climbing. Significant facial trauma, possible skull fracture. No obvious spinal deformity but treating as precautionary." She elevated his feet, using her tactical vest as a prop, managing for shock. Her hands checked for additional injuries, broken ribs, internal bleeding, anything that might kill him while they waited for the corpsman. "Good," Reeves said quietly, stepping back. "Keep going." 30 seconds later, the base corpsman arrived with a medical kit, but those 30 seconds had been critical. Maya's intervention had stabilized Davis, kept his airway clear, managed the shock that could have killed him as surely as any injury. The corpsman took over, and Davis was evacuated to the base hospital. The exercise was terminated immediately. Instructors secured the area, began the investigation into the pyrotechnic malfunction, and documented everything with grim efficiency. Maya sat alone in the dirt, her hands covered in Davis's blood, staring at nothing. She'd frozen. When it mattered most, when a real person needed her, she'd frozen for precious seconds that could have cost Davis his life. The fact that she'd eventually unfrozen, that her intervention had helped, didn't change the fundamental failure. She'd proven Reeves right. She wasn't ready. Maybe she'd never be ready. That night Maya sat in the barracks, still in her dust-covered utilities, staring at Commander Reeves's Sig Sauer. The pistol had been with her through everything. The Syria operation, the successful drills, tonight's disaster. But what did it mean now? What did any of it mean if she still froze when real lives were at stake? A knock on the door. Reeves entered without waiting for permission, his expression unreadable. "Davis is stable," he said, settling into a chair across from her. "Concussion, broken nose, no skull fracture. He'll be fine. Back to training in 2 weeks." Maya nodded, unable to speak. "You're thinking about quitting," Reeves continued. "It wasn't a question." "I froze, sir. When it mattered, I froze, just like I always have." "For 5 seconds. Then you unfroze and saved Davis's life. The corpsman said your airway management and shock treatment were textbook perfect. If you hadn't intervened when you did, Davis might have aspirated blood and developed pneumonia. Your actions mattered, Chen." "But I still froze." "Yes, you did." Reeves leaned forward, his voice hard. "And you know what? You always will. In some situations, under some conditions, you'll freeze, just like every other warrior who's ever lived. You think I've never frozen?" Maya looked up surprised. "Fallujah 2004, Reeves said quietly. "We were clearing a building and I came around a corner face to face with an insurgent. Neither of us fired. We just stared at each other for maybe 2 seconds, an eternity in combat. Then he turned and ran and I snapped back and pursued. But those 2 seconds haunt me. What if he'd been faster? What if my freeze had cost my teammates' lives?" He gestured to his pistol. "I told you this weapon saved my life 4 times. I didn't tell you about the times I was too slow, too scared, too human. About the missions where I made mistakes, where people died despite my best efforts, where I had to live with the weight of imperfect decisions in impossible situations." Reeves stood, moving to the window overlooking the darkened compound. "You want to know the difference between a warrior and a coward, Chen? It's not whether you feel fear. It's not whether you sometimes freeze. It's whether you let that freeze be permanent or temporary. A coward stays frozen. A warrior unfreezes and does the job anyway." He turned back to face her. "You froze for 5 seconds tonight. Then you saved Davis's life. That makes you a warrior who experienced a temporary freeze, not a coward who gave up." Maya felt something shift inside her, not the erasure of doubt, but a reframing of it. Maybe courage wasn't the absence of fear or the elimination of freezing. Maybe it was the capacity to unfreeze, to act despite terror, to keep showing up even when you knew you might fail. The selection board meets tomorrow, Reeves continued. I'm recommending you move forward to SEAL qualification training, not because you're fearless, not because you never freeze, but because when you do freeze, you find a way to unfreeze, because you keep showing up despite knowing you might fail. That's the person I want on my team. He moved toward the door, then paused. You know why I gave you my pistol, Chen. It wasn't to make you brave. It was to remind you what bravery actually is. This weapon represents every moment I've been terrified and acted anyway. Every time I've frozen and then unfrozen. Every mission where I've done my best and hoped it was good enough. He gestured to the Sig Sauer on her bunk. Keep it. You've earned it. Not because you've conquered fear, you haven't and you never will, but because you've learned to function despite it. That's all any of us can do. After Reeves left, Maya picked up the pistol again, seeing it differently now. It wasn't a symbol of perfection or fearlessness. It was a symbol of persistence, of showing up, of freezing and unfreezing and trying again. 3 months later, Petty Officer Second Class Maya Chen graduated from SEAL qualification training. She wasn't the strongest graduate. She wasn't the fastest. Her marksmanship scores were above average but not exceptional. She'd frozen during 2 separate training exercises, once for 3 seconds during an underwater demolition drill, once for 4 seconds during a high-altitude navigation course. But she'd unfrozen. She'd completed the missions. She'd kept showing up. The graduation ceremony was small, attended by families and commanders. Maya stood in formation with her class, wearing dress whites that felt foreign after months of utilities and tactical gear. Commander Reeves approached to present her graduation certificate. As he handed it to her, he also presented a leather holster containing his Sig Sauer P226. This belongs to you now, he said quietly, his voice carrying only to her. You've earned it, not because you're not afraid, but because you fight anyway. Maya accepted the pistol, feeling its familiar weight settle into her hand one final time. On her hip, secured in the new holster, it felt right. Not as a weapon she'd used to prove her courage, but as a reminder of what courage actually meant. That evening, after the ceremony ended and families departed, Maya found herself alone on the beach near Coronado, watching the sun set over the Pacific. She drew the pistol, feeling its weight, remembering everything it represented. Reeves had told her it had saved his life 4 times and killed 11 people. Now it would be hers to carry forward, not into combat immediately, but into whatever came next. More training, more failures, more moments of freezing and unfreezing. She thought about the 47 consecutive failures that had brought her to Reeves's attention, about the Syria operation that had shown her what purpose felt like, about the kill house drills where she'd learned to function despite fear, about Davis, bleeding in the dirt while she froze and then unfroze and saved his life. All of it, the failures and successes, the terror and triumph, had been necessary, had built the foundation for whatever warrior she would become. Maya holstered the pistol and stood, turning back toward the base. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to freeze and unfreeze, new tests of courage that had nothing to do with fearlessness and everything to do with persistence. She was ready, not because she'd conquered fear, but because she'd learned to carry it forward and act anyway. Commander Reeves watched from the observation deck of the command building, seeing Maya's small figure walking back from the beach in the gathering darkness. Morrison appeared beside him. Think she'll make it, sir, in actual combat? Reeves was quiet for a moment, then smiled. She already has, Lieutenant, the combat against herself. That's the hardest battle any warrior fights. Everything else is just execution. He turned away from the window, leaving Morrison to watch Maya Chen disappear into the base. A graduate now, A SEAL candidate, a warrior who'd learned that courage wasn't a weapon you carried but a choice you made, again and again, every time fear told you to quit and you showed up anyway. That, Reeves knew, was the only weapon that truly mattered. Not the pistol at your hip or the rifle in your hands, but the decision to unfreeze, to act, to keep fighting despite knowing you might fail. Maya Chen had found that weapon, and now, whatever came next, she'd be ready. Not fearless, but fierce anyway. The end.